They picked up Jonah, and they hurled him into the sea, and the sea ceased from its raging, and the men feared the Lord exceedingly, and they offered a sacrifice to the Lord and made vows. And then the Lord appointed a great fish to swallow up Jonah. And Jonah was in the belly of the fish 3 days and 3 nights. So Jonah jumps on a boat and he decides that he's going to head out. And as they get out into the boat and as they begin to kind of head out, the Lord begins to stir the waters up and he begins to stir the winds up. And there's a great storm that comes about. And it tells us that so much that the boat was, the sailors or the mariners felt like the boat was going to start to come apart. It tells us that they just begin to pray to their God. And they begin, which means to me that they all worship different gods. And they're praying that their God might calm the sea and calm the winds and calm things. They're throwing stuff overboard. They're doing everything that they possibly can to try to calm things down, to lighten the ship, to make sure that it's good. And then the captain goes down and Jonah's just knocked out. I mean, the storm is the way, I can only imagine. I mean, we don't know the size of the boat that they were in. We don't know how big it was, but I'm sure it wasn't that big. And the boat is rocking and everything's happening and Jonah's just knocked out. And the captain comes down and is like, man, you need to pray to your gods that maybe he'll calm the seas down. And they come up and they figure out that it's Jonah is the one that caused this, that it's Jonah that brought this upon this. And I love this, that when they finally confront him, he like all of a sudden like starts to preach this message. Well, I'm a Hebrew and I'm a child of God. And I worship the God that created the sea and the wind. And he's like just identifying what's happening. It's like, bro, if you had just done what God told you to do, you would have never been in this situation in the first place. And he kind of just identifies who he is and who God is. And he's like, well, just throw me overboard. Like, if you just toss me overboard, then, like, everything will just calm down. It's like almost like I'm so afraid to do what God told me to do. Just throw me overboard in my life, and then this will end. My life will end. This will happen. Like, he was so afraid to go to Nineveh, which we're going to talk about in just a minute. And the sailors are like, no. And it tells us that they just continue to row. They continue to try to see if they could get the boat to the shore. And when they couldn't get it there, they prayed out to our God, to Jonah's God. And then they throw Jonah overboard. And it tells us that when the storm stopped, that they began to worship Jonah, or to worship God. And I find it so interesting that this group of sailors who didn't even believe in our God eventually begin to pray to him and end up eventually following our God. That even in Jonah's disobedience, God still saved a boat full of lost sailors. That even in Jonah's disobedience, God still saved a boat of lost people. And so see, today, I don't want to just go through the story and give you a summary of it and tell you what many of you heard every time that we've heard a message preached on Jonah. We're asked 2 questions. Are you running from God? Or have you run from God? Or don't run from God? And we talk about that piece of it. I want to show you something that maybe you've never seen before. Because it's something that I hadn't really seen before. And I want to talk to you for just a few minutes this morning, specifically about the 2 reasons that Jonah did not want to go to Nineveh in the first place. And the 2 reasons why Jonah didn't want to go to Nineveh in the first place comes down to 2 words: fear and hate. Fear and hate. Here's the idea. He was fearful. It tells us in the scriptures that Nineveh was an evil place, that they did evil things. If you know anything about history, if you know anything about this, if you've ever studied the story of Jonah before, Nineveh was a very evil, dark, and bad place. They would kill people and then parade and then put them out along the street so people could see them. Like, I don't want to get too graphic because we got kids in here, but they're just not a very nice place. Like, they are a very evil place. Killing and torturing people and stuff. Like, they're just not a very nice group of people. So Jonah is fearful. He doesn't want to go to Nineveh because he understands and he realizes that, man, there's a chance that I could lose my life. That maybe, just maybe, I could be killed. I don't want to go to Nineveh. He's fearful. The second thing is hate. Jonah didn't want to show up and go to Nineveh because he realized that if he goes to Nineveh and he does exactly what God tells him to do, that there's a chance, a really likely chance that God is going to end up saving a group of people that Jonah doesn't believe needs to be saved because of what's happened and because of the torture and the pain and the anguish and all the stuff that they brought on people. And so because of fear and hate, Jonah decided not to go to Nineveh. Fear and hate. was preventing him from doing what the Lord had told him to do, or what the Lord has told us is the two most important things: love God and love people. See, Jonah's fear and hate was telling him the people of Nineveh didn't matter, that the people of Nineveh weren't important. And it's interesting to me that right now, in the temperature and the time of our country, right, that in this time of unrest in our country, a time of fear, and a time of racism, and a time of division, and a time of judgment, and a time of turning our hearts towards our own agendas and away from God's agendas, that are we really any different than Jonah? That God has called us to love people. That God has called us to love people regardless of their skin color, regardless of their political affiliation, regardless of their economic condition, regardless of their likes or their dislikes. Like, God has called us to love people regardless. But everything in our country is so divided right now. Everything in our country is based on, well, I'm Republican and you're Democrat, or I'm Democrat and you're Republican, so we can't talk, we can't have a decent conversation, or you're this or you're that, or I'm this and you're that. It doesn't matter. Like, everything just seems so divided to me. And Kim and I had the chance on Thursday night to go downtown to Munn Park to this rally. It was called One Heart Prayer Rally. And Free Life Chapel, which is a church in North Lakeland that's a very multicultural church, probably the most multicultural church in Lakeland. Love Pastor Scott and Pastor Cindy. And New Bethel AME Church with Pastor Eddie Lake, which is a predominantly African-American church, came together and pulled this event together in downtown Lakeland. And Kim and I had the opportunity to go there. I don't know, there's probably, a few hundred, 400 or 500 people down there, maybe at least. And it didn't matter your denomination, didn't matter your skin color, didn't matter anything. They just wanted to. The churches came together so that we could just worship God, pray out for our city, pray out for our community. And it was one of the most beautiful things that I've ever been part of. All these different pastors from all these different churches who all got up and shared thoughts and shared where they were at with things and how they were feeling about stuff and what God's word had to say about some things. A couple people stood up. They maybe had like 3-4 minutes per person. And then they had all these different pastors who came up at the end and just prayed for specific things. Anyways, it was just this beautiful thing of everybody coming together in unity, which is what the church did. And their whole heartbeat for it was that the church needs to drive what's happening right now. Like, the church can't just sit back and go, oh man, there's all this unrest and all this craziness and all this stuff that's happening in our city. If the church just sits back, like, this is the time in our culture and in society where the church needs to step to the forefront, yet so many churches just step back because they don't know what to do. And so I'm not going to stand up here this morning and turn this into a political stance or a personal opinion about everything that's going on. Like, I'll never do that. I'll never do that from behind the pulpit or from behind on a platform. But I do want to say this because I think it ties into what we're talking about this morning with the two reasons why Jonah didn't want to go to Nineveh, because of fear and hate. That there's all this dividing even now. Like, I don't even really want to be on Facebook right now, which I may just take a break again because it's ridiculous. Yes, we know that all lives matter, white ones and black ones and blue ones, like, all lives matter. But right now, I believe that black lives matter in the same way that God called Jonah to Nineveh. I believe that he's calling us to reach out and to love and to share truth and love with the black community of our city. And so I don't think it's a matter of black lives matter versus white lives matter or blue lives matter or this or that. I just believe that God has called us right now. The black community in our city is hurting. And so if we can come alongside them and love them and pray for them and be there for them, then that's what we're supposed to do, right? And God called Jonah to Nineveh. Maybe God's calling us to love on some people that are hurting. Because Jonah didn't think the people of Nineveh mattered. And there's many of us that don't think this group matters or that group matters or this group matters. But God called Jonah to go to Nineveh, and I believe in the same way he can call us to love on the people in our community that are hurting. So I'm not saying that we should support riots and destruction and all this kind of stuff. All I'm saying is this, is that we should love people, especially those that are hurting and suffering. See, Jonah was running from a people group that desperately needed God. God had given Jonah something very specific that he was supposed to do, but yet he was running away from a people group of people that desperately needed God. And we can't allow fear or hate to keep us from shining God's light on people. That Jesus told his disciples in Matthew chapter 5, verses 14 through 16, he said this, "You are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden. Nor do people light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a stand, and it gives light to all in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father who is in heaven." That Jesus tells his disciples, man, you are the light of the world. Man, let your light shine so that people can see you, that people will know that you are a follower of Jesus, that people will know that you are one of his disciples. Like, let your light shine. When people light a lamp, they don't put it under a basket, but man, they hang it up so that it gives light everywhere. And I believe in the same way, we can't allow fear or hate to keep us from shining God's light on people. Jonah eventually goes to Nineveh in chapter 3. And he lets God's love and light shine. And we're going to look at that in 2 weeks. But today, for this morning, I want to take a moment and just say that we can't allow fear and hate to keep us from what God may be calling us to do. That maybe you're fearful to step into maybe what God is calling you to. Maybe you're fearful to step into something new. Maybe you're fearful to step into something that's outside of your control a little bit, that you believe God may be leading you to. And the reason why is because you're not really sure what the future looks like. And we always say, man, God, if you could just tell me what it's going to look like 6 months from now, or what it's going to look like a year from now, and if I'm okay with that, then I'll step into it. And God's like, nope. We talk about this all the time, right? God's like, nope, you just need to go do what I told you to do. Jonah, you don't know what's going to happen when you get to Nineveh. They may kill you, or they may say yes to a relationship with me. You don't know. All I need you to do is go to Nineveh. But yet so many of us are fearful. Like, our society is just stricken with fear. I know COVID's kind of coming to an end, and it seems like it's coming to an end because people are just over it, but it's really not. Like, we're just fearful. Everything we do has to be social distancing, and we have to set up all these things and all this stuff, and I believe that we should, but still. But maybe God's just calling you to something this morning. Maybe God's asking you to step outside your comfort zone a little bit. And we're fearful because we don't know what the future looks like, but that's okay. Trust him anyways. Or maybe you've allowed dislike or hate towards someone or a group of people to prevent you from loving them like you know that you should. And maybe today you need to put that down at the altar and let him change your heart towards them. It could be a people group. It could be a person. It could be whatever. I don't want to be a man or a husband or a father or a pastor that's motivated by fear or hate or prejudice or anything that's not of God and not of God's word. I want to be motivated by love. And I want to be motivated by God's power. And I want to be motivated by self-control in the same way that it tells us in 2 Timothy 1:7. For God did not give us a spirit of fear, but he gave us a spirit of power and love and self-control. And so I ask you a question today. Are you going to be motivated by fear or hate, or are you going to be motivated by love? Because the choice is yours to make. I can tell you which one I'm choosing. I'm choosing love. I want to choose love, but I want to choose love and move in love and be motivated by love, but I want to stay sensitive to the sound of God's voice in my ear. Because if God says move, or God says go, or God says here, or God says there, or God says do this or do that, or whatever God should say, I want to be motivated by love, but I want to stay sensitive to his word so that I'm obedient to that. Because at the end of the day, obedience is key. And so what choice are you making? Because at the end of the day, we just need to choose love. And I don't know what that looks like for you. I don't know if you've chosen fear. I don't know if you've chosen hate. I don't know where you've been. Jonah ran because of fear and hate, but we can make a different choice. I'm excited about next week because as Jonah is sitting in the belly of the well, he begins to pray this prayer of repentance towards the fear and the hate that he felt. I'm excited to look at that with you next week, but here's the idea, is that we have a choice to make this morning. We're going to be motivated by fear, we're going to be motivated by hate, we're going to be motivated by dislike, and I don't like this and I don't like that, so I'm not going to step into that. God just calls us to love. And so let's just love. And so this morning I want to ask you to close your eyes and bow your heads for me for just a moment.